Hi, this is John with American Enlightenment, and today I've got Sherry on here for a contrasting opinion about the current state of economic affairs in the United States and how it's impacting the world. Sherry, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you.
Okay, so what have you noticed about, we got the tariffs that are coming up. I interviewed Jay last week about tariffs and about the economy. Okay.
Well, I don't believe that tariffs benefit anybody in general in the short run, especially the way that Trump is doing this. I see it as a tactic that he is using, not just to bring people to the bargaining table, but to set the stage for people that are his constituents and wealthy people to cash in on the stock market, have the stock market crash, which is destabilizing the stock market already.
Mm-hmm.
The stock market goes down. Those wealthy people like Charles Schwab and the NASCAR owner, they buy all the stock when it drops. And then a few hours later, he rolls the tariffs back. The stock goes up and they make millions. The people that are hurt are the common people, not the people that are part of the elite or the wealthy, because they can't afford the cost of goods already. And these tariffs are causing all of this is rolled back to the consumer. So the consumer has to pay more for it. Tariffs, the countries automatically will pass that inflation onto the consumer. So if it costs you more to buy cars, it costs you more to buy groceries. Nobody wins in that scenario. And I think this hardball tactic might work in real estate, but it doesn't work for the world economy.
Let me ask you, when you said real estate, how would it work in real estate?
Well, not necessarily real estate, but commodities in general. The stock market dropping, it's like almost like insider trading. You give somebody the heads up that you're going to roll out these big expensive tariffs, then the stock market crashes. They buy up a bunch of these stocks that have now crashed, and then he rolls the tariffs back to what they were and puts a delay on these tariffs. And now all of these people that have sold their stock lost money, and then these wealthy people come back in and they buy the stock, and now they've made millions, if not billions, on some of these back and forths.
Okay. And let me ask, okay, we're both the same age.
Yes.
Okay. And back in the day, how many people did working in a household? It was just usually one person working and one person took care of the kids.
Yes.
The traditional mother-father kind of scenario. When did that change? What time period?
I would say by even the 80s, 90s, you could no
Was it
longer
pivotal?
afford to have a one-person income family. The economy jobs have not paced at the same level of inflation. So the average American dream now is not even achievable for most people because nobody can afford a house. The wages are not in alignment with what the cost of living is.
Because we're dealing with a service economy.
Yes, it's taking far more money. You look at most 20-year-old people now, they're living at home. Where they would have been independent a decade or so back, they now are having to stay home. They can work a job, but to afford an apartment, they want 3 times what the rent is. And they don't make that kind of money. So it's made a new set of people that are poverty-ridden, even though they're working full-time. You can't even exist on a minimum wage job. Nobody can. But even people who are making a moderate income are struggling. They just can't afford it.
Okay. It was very interesting. You said the 80s was a pivotal change.
That's to the best of my knowledge. I can remember that it seemed
Yeah.
like in the
I'd have
80s
to
you
agree.
could have some of these things that now are a stretch to afford.
And the 90s got worse. In the early 2000s, it was just went on and on. So I think we had everything after 9/11 was different. But let's go back to the 80s. So in the 70s, we didn't have a lot of contact with China. Remember that?
Well, in the 70s, I was a child, so I probably wasn't paying too much attention to it at that
But
point.
we actually didn't. And then Nixon and Kissinger kind of opened up the doorway. It was a good thing to do with China because all countries need to talk to each other. And we started progressively giving them more and more access to our market so they could sell their goods. But they count for probably 1 or 2 billion people.
They have a massive population.
Massive population. So if we were doing business with each other and I said, you can sell me, I can sell you goods, but if you try and sell me anything back that you make at your craft store, it's actually going to be, I'll tax it double, and then it can be passed. Then I can buy it if I tax it double. So how's that? See, the thing is, the playing field's not fair at all. Okay.
We don't manufacture as many things anymore because it's so much cheaper to do it in other countries.
The reason why it's cheaper is because in between the late 70s and the 80s, our jobs just left. I mean, what is it that they call the Midwest now? The Rust Belt. It used to be the manufacturing cradle for the planet. And we don't.
Well, look at car manufacturers. We used to have a lot of car manufacturers.
We still do.
But when it became cheaper for companies to send their work to other countries, they took advantage of that, which then in the long run hurt the American economy because not as many people have access to those jobs anymore.
And I'd have to say, the audience might disagree with me. I think that the fact that companies that did that, it was un-American for them to do that.
Well, at the end of the day, all companies are about profit.
True.
And they're going to go where their profit is the greatest because they have to answer to their shareholders. And their shareholders get a bigger share of the market and they get more return of investment if they're making better profit. Is it right? No. Is it good for American people? No. But at the end of the day, they're about profit. And American workers and just all of the laws that protect American workers comes at a cost. And unfortunately, that cost is not offset enough to keep the manufacturing here sometimes. It's an unfortunate event that happened where it's just cheaper to deal with other countries that don't have the same laws and they can manufacture it for their workers make less money. And so a lot of companies have switched to that opportunity.
But we kind of set ourselves up for a disaster because we opened the doorway up for a détente in diplomacy with China. And at the same point in time, they started ramping up production, started selling their goods to us. But they're a communist nation. So, but I would have to say, China and my hat's kind of off to them. They're very, very smart people. Their government loaned money to people to build factories, and then the I guess the way they have it set up is the government is actually a partner or owner of the company, and the people just manage it and run it, and they collect a salary. It sounds to me it's almost like how Canada has adjusted capitalism. That's the term that they use. I would have to call this adjusted communism. But it's not a level playing field in many aspects because there's so much of their populace, and they're very industrious people. But at the same point in time, what I think that's where I want to go with this, is we should be able to sell goods to them as well, just like they sell goods to us. And we should have it where we have a tariff. I think the tariffs, the way it was set up, was it was 10 or 15 or 20%, but theirs is triple. So we can't send our cars. We can't but in other words, they're taking all the manufacturing, and all the factories have now moved over there, right? In different Asian countries as well, not just China. And all clothing, shoes, nothing is made in the United States anymore.
Yeah, we have gone down in that.
We've given it away. When COVID hit, personal protective equipment, medical gloves, P95s, K95s, are all manufactured in China. And we got a reality wake-up call because you could not find that stuff, respirator cartridges, P100s.
That's because the whole
HEPA
world was
cartridges.
waiting for them.
Well, the Chinese government basically told the factories not to send anything to the United States, hold on to it. When they realized they had a problem, they held on to all their PPE that they were manufacturing. The government just bought it or whatever. What's funny is when the Chinese government tells their populace something, they can move mountains and build factories and skyscrapers and all kinds of wondrous things they do within a fraction of the time we do it. And we can't even seem to get a light rail system built.
Well, they don't have regulations. They don't have protections for their workers.
I think what they do is
they don't have unions. There's a whole lot of things they don't have to go through for red tape.
I'd agree with that.
They just call the shots 100%.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is where it's not a level playing field. But let me ask you this. Okay, so we both agreed the jobs went away.
Yes.
In the 80s. Pretty much my thing was the late 70s, 80s. It started shifting. You started seeing made in China, made in Mexico. You started seeing it on things way more often, starting in that time period. And now it's pretty much, I don't think anything I'm wearing is made in the United States.
No, probably not.
Probably the chair I'm sitting on is not made in the United States.
And unfortunately, because of the same economy that we have where people can't afford to make ends meet, they buy cheaper goods. And the cheaper goods are made in China.
It's an interesting perspective that you brought up because that's absolutely correct. So we're defeating ourselves by going...
Yes. If you're poor or you're middle class and you have a choice between going to a box store or a department store that is national and you can buy something for $10 versus buying it from a name brand that maybe is made in the United States and you're going to pay $25 for it. If you're already struggling, there's no question where you're going. Now, the products won't last as long, but you're going to go where you get the most value for your money and you're not looking for whether or not it's going to last.
And that's an interesting perspective that you just brought up. The products won't last as long. And that actually started with cars. Cars
now will crumple in an accident, whereas they did not act that way, 25 years ago.
Yeah,
they were made so much better. And it's the same way with appliances. Now most of our appliances are made overseas. And it's very difficult to get the parts. It's very difficult to get all of those things.
Because they want you to buy it.
You buy something and it's obsolete in 7 years. The market is designed for you to have to buy it again in 7 years. Yet your parents probably have a washer or a dryer or a refrigerator that's been sitting around for 17, 20 years. And it was made here and it is still functioning. You may not be able to get parts for it anymore, but it's still functioning because the product was superior then to the products we produce now and the products that we're purchasing now.
It was designed to last a lifetime,
because people didn't have money to spend. People were very economical then. They reused things. If you have grandparents and people like that knew to sew their socks when they had a hole in them, that's not the generation we're in now. It's throw it away, buy another one. It's cheap enough. The commodities are cheap enough that you can just buy another one and replace it. There's not as much market in fixing it as there is in replacing it.
So getting back to the tariffs, okay, how do you get jobs to come back here now?
Well, even with that process, even with raising the tariffs, if all of that was to go exceptionally well, it would still probably take him his entire presidency to be able to get those factories set up, functional, and working, and get them back in the United States. And to do that, you are also going to increase the cost of those goods. You're not going to have a product that is made in the United States, as much as I would love for it to be made here. You are not going to be able to produce it at the same price China is going to be able to produce it, or another country that doesn't have the same
Not if you
costs.
level the playing field with tariffs.
Yeah, but he's going so far on these tariffs, he's making the nationwide and the worldwide economy is crashing. It can't stabilize itself with it this way. And the way it's going, it's causing the stocks to crash. Every one of these things, what are the middle class and the lower class people for income going to do in that 4 years while they wait for this to come back and benefit them? They don't have 4 years to be able to afford to buy food or to be able to afford to put gas in their car or do anything else. You couldn't even afford to buy a car with the way it's going with adding these tariffs right now to cars. Price of average car is going to go up about $8,000. If you couldn't afford it to start off with, you certainly are not going to be able to afford it when it's $8,000 more expensive.
But I think it's kind of interesting. South Korea cut a deal. They're basically moving a bunch of manufacturing plants here in the United States. They cut a deal right off the bat. Like, they'll bring their plants here.
Because they're a smaller country and they don't have the leverage. What he is banking on is leverage, that he will bully his way into getting what he wants, make it high, and then drop it back down. And he's trying to leverage these countries against each other to do it my way or the highway. And that has just as much opportunity to fail as it does to succeed.
What's your perspective on, let's say Trump got into office, and let's just play a what if scenario. How about if he doesn't do any of this and does his business as usual and let it keep going? What happens to America? We're already seeing the decline, because through my show and through Unseen Americans, I think we've seen a trend. A lot of people we talk to that end up in drug addiction or having problems later on in life grew up in single parent households with chaos. There was less of that when there was two parents in the household. One worked and one didn't. America was more stable during that time.
But this isn't the 1950s, and you're not going to get every woman that wants to stay home and raise children.
That's not what I'm getting at. It doesn't have to be a woman staying home.
No, but historically it is.
Well, let's talk about just logistics, right? What's good for families? What's good, like two parents working at the same time. Kids are in daycare. It's incredibly stressful. Divorce, you can look at it from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Divorce rates just shot up.
Yes.
When you went now the
more
late
conflict.
More stress.
And more stress.
More stress. More the gal's working, the husband's working. It's harder to provide. There's more chaos.
Well, you would have to provide more of a level playing field if you wanted to have. You'd have to have higher incomes, number one, to be able to sustain that for two-income families.
The way we're going right
one.
now, the United States has turned into a service-based economy. We don't manufacture. We're service-based. And everybody, talks about like, oh, the elite. Well,
they never struggle.
The elite, basically generational wealth, and some didn't have, invested their money, and when the economy was shifting, and they made out like bandits.
They always do. They buy when it's low and sell when it's high.
Yeah, well,
but they're the only ones that have the available funds to do that.
Sometimes that's not the case. But what I'm getting at is how do you put the brakes on this whole thing? Because the economy, the country is one thing. The American economy has been going in the wrong direction for a long time, and we both agreed on this. That this started basically in the 80s, late 70s, right? And it's progressively got worse. When do we put the brakes on and say enough is enough? How do you do it?
I'm not sure how you would level the playing field at this point with the cost of the goods. manufacturing it here
Tariffs.
and not sending it back to the customer.
Well, I don't think the Chinese are going to play nice. One of the things that the Chinese do, and I'm not bashing the Chinese nation at all right? But this is a business tactic. Business is business, right? Uh, they'll infringe on patent rights. They'll do knockoffs. Somebody invents something like France, Germany, whatever, the United States. Next, it's been whipped up in China for a third of the price, and they just steal it and start making it. Uh, there has to be some type of change that has to go on. The other thing that we have that I talked about in different episodes is the fentanyl crisis. Fentanyl originally was a Chinese product, 100%. And what they would do is they would just keep chemically change the combination so that the DA and our law enforcement would outlaw one version of it and they would just come up with a different version of it. So constantly, morphing and that kind of thing. So in other words, they're about about making the money. Okay. And how do we don't have a manufacturing economy anymore. I saw a video on a social media platform where it was made in China, and they were making fun of American workers, and they showed us all at workbenches, overweight, slow and lethargic, like working, and they were poking fun at us that like we're really going to make our own goods. It was bad. I looked at that. I'm like, wow. I'm like, if that's not a slap in the face, I don't know what is. But at the same point, how do you get jobs coming back here that are manufacturing jobs? Because not everybody's going to do a college degree or people who are inventors and innovators. We should be. We're a nation of inventions, and every great civilization or great empire or great country, whatever made them successful, they quit doing, and that's when that's when they went into decline. We invented things in this country, Tesla, Westinghouse, Alexander Graham Bell. I mean, the list goes on and on of all the cool stuff that came out of this country. But when you fast forward, there's a lot of things we invent. We haven't stopped inventing. We haven't stopped innovating. We just got into a form of what I call advanced capitalism, where we're making billions of dollars with this company. If we stop manufacturing here and stop dealing with the unions, we can be making trillions. But yet, by moving the company, we're going to gut the middle of America, and all these people, these families that are making money working at the car plant, or they're making furniture, or they're making shoes, gone. And what has that gotten us?
Where everything is being made somewhere else.
Everything's made somewhere else, and there's both parents have to work. The divorce rates are sky high. Drug addiction is off the rails. Or addictions doesn't have to be drugs, but alcohol too, because people are stressed out. They can't get ahead in life, and it takes two people to raise a family, and it takes a family network, grandma and grandpa. But our whole family structure started, just in my opinion, started disintegrating. I'd say in the 70s, late 70s, definitely in the 80s.
Well, take away tax benefits for companies that send their work elsewhere.
That's a great idea, and I like that.
Charge them higher rates of tax if they are going, because let's face it, corporations answer to their shareholders and they answer to their bottom line. If you make it inconvenient for them to offshore their work, they will keep it here. Give them some sort of an incentive to bring it back. But unfortunately, you have to also figure out a way to navigate not passing that cost on to the consumer. Because at the end of the day, the consumer is who's going to get hurt in all of it. Because if you can't afford to buy it, then that you're dead in the water. But I would say, historically, a lot of these large corporations, although they probably pay heavily in taxes, they probably also, their bottom line indicates they're making money hand over fist. They could make a little less money if it was inconvenient for them to be making it somewhere else. Give them a span of time to bring some of this manufacturing back. But it's not an overnight event. This is a multi-year something that would take years to implement. Not only do you have to have the land, you have to build the plants, you have to hire the people, you have to train them, you have to bring all of that back. To do that is going to be a major undertaking, and it's not something that's going to happen in 2 or 3 or 4 years. It might take it a 5 or 6 year project to get it implemented and in place.
But in your opinion, does it need to happen?
It should happen.
Okay.
But how to do that and still have
and the American worker and the American family is all integrated in the economy. And if the economy sucks, and people I've talked to people who are working 2 and 3 jobs just to get. This is insanity.
The average young person in their early 20s, 2 or 3 of them are having to rent a 3-bedroom apartment together, and each one of them, because none of them, even combined, can afford to have an independent apartment. The average person can't afford a lot of the things that our parents could afford. Mm-hmm. You pay more now for your car than what your parents paid for their house.
With President Trump, not everybody's on the same page. Okay.
Yes, that is
I'll
correct.
say that delicate. Okay. Yeah. Okay. But if you were him, how are you going to rectify this problem?
Not the way he's doing it. He is just.
My question is
throwing it out there and seeing what sticks, and he just
I think
everything
he's got
he
advisors.
Does, well, then he should stop listening to them, because the American people wouldn't be protesting all over the place for the tactics that he's using and the way he is bypassing law to make his own laws. There is a process you have to go through for all of this, and he is bypassing it all with executive order, and that is not the way it actually happens.
When you're dealing with large sums of money, right or left, independent, who cares? People are swayed by money and corruption flourishes. And if you're trying to make some change, if you're going to the people who are benefiting from the corruption, what way do you think they're going to vote? They don't want anything to change.
Well, right now you've got the richest man in the world.
Who's the richest man in the world? I'm curious.
Mr. Elon Musk?
No, actually, he's not.
Well, he should not be in the position he is in. He should not have the control that he has. Okay. He was not voted in by the American people. Mm-hmm. He was not voted in by Congress. He has not got the authority to do the things that the president is allowing him to do.
Then who should?
And the populace at large is up in arms over the laws that he is breaking.
And do you know that a lot of those protesters are being paid to go to trash those?
No, I don't know that.
Yeah, they actually are. They're actually being paid.
Do you have proof of that?
Actually, they're coming out with it.
Or is it on Truth Social?
No, actually, it was. It came out on X, which a lot of
X, who is also owned by Elon Musk.
Okay.
The man who is influencing everything that is going on, from all of the federal cuts to all of the agencies that are being dismantled. And who's benefiting from some of this? Not the American people.
We're in disagreement that Elon Musk shouldn't be. You're saying he should be auditing.
If he wanted Elon Musk, he should have him go through the appropriate channels and be voted in by Congress.
Yeah, but what are the appropriate channels?
Congress.
Oh.
You are supposed to have 3 separate entities.
Can I point something out to you?
And they're not using it the way it's supposed to be.
I'm not going to name names of congressmen or senators. If a congressman is worth $150,000 when they start, they get first elected, and 6 years down the road, they've got like assets in the millions.
Then I would say, unless their investments or something that they have done personally warrants it, investigate them.
But they don't. That's commonplace.
But right now, you've got things that are going on that are not okay. You've got the Department of Justice being weaponized against people that don't agree with his policies. You can't do that.
That's
The
nothing
rule
new.
of law is the rule of law.
That's nothing new. The Biden administration did the same thing. And now it's come to light. I don't know if you're aware of this. I don't know who was running the country when he was president, because apparently he didn't have all his mental faculties. They had to put tape on the floor for the guy. Yeah, for Biden. It's in books written by Democrats.
Have you listened to some of the rambling statements that Mr. Trump makes when he can't stay on topic?
Well, that's not. We're going to back
it does not sound terribly.
Well, you know what thing I like about him is, and one thing I liked about Reagan is I
liked Reagan. Reagan was a good president.
Reagan was a great president.
Reagan and Trump have nothing in common.
But I'll admit something, and a lot of people are going to cringe out there, and some are like, "Yeah." Initially, when Reagan was doing his tactic with the Soviet Union, I thought he was going to get us into a third world war. Honestly, I was like, "What is this guy doing?" You know, like he's like literally poking the bear. But it was a tactic where Star Wars was a gamble to outspend them and bankrupt them, and it worked. And I wouldn't say he defeated the Soviet Union. He just brought them to a point where they didn't need to fear us, and we didn't want a war with them. And then I think the Soviet people, the former Soviet Union, they were afraid of America, of going after them. And this arms race thing was insane. But in the meantime, these two superpowers are like got enough weapons to like vaporize the planet 15 times over, or was it 25 or something like that now? But at the same point in time, we ignored what was burning in the Middle East. With usually wars are started for two reasons: money and religion. And we got a good taste of religious terrorism in the early 2000s, pretty good. And those are people who, in my view, don't play by the same rules. And that's, I think, a lot of our conversation that we had before. And their economies are all based on a commodity of just one thing: oil. So the whole planet's addicted to oil, right?
Yes.
Oil shoots up, food shoots up, bus fares shoot up, everything shoots up, airfare shoots up. No matter what you do. But at the same point in time, we had the technology for the electric car. It was actually invented in the late 70s and 80s. And a company that's one of my favorite companies, it's American based, they killed it because they viewed it as the oil companies viewed it as a threat. And now, whether or not you like Elon Musk or anything that he does,
I don't dislike Elon Musk, but a person. What he's doing,
he gets things done.
He gets things done by bypassing rules, regulations, and dismantling agencies that investigated his companies. And now he is an immense place of power, and he should not be in that place of power.
Then who should be?
Realistically, when did the White House become something to hawk products on? Why was Tesla on the lawn of the White House being promoted by the president?
I think maybe,
why is the Easter egg hunt for the White House being funded by
President Trump felt bad
brand names?
That, there's acts of, and I'll use the word terrorism.
It is not terrorism to attack somebody's product. It's poor.
No,
it's
when you
illegal.
Plant a
it's
bomb
not
at a charging station in between two transformers, which happened just up the road from here, and you explode a bomb, a pipe bomb, or whatever, bomb or some.
Prosecute them.
Okay, that or you go to dealerships,
but you can't just cause one of your cronies to become terrorism because they're bothering.
How about lighting massive amounts of cars on fire? Is that terrorism?
It's illegal. It's not terrorism. Terrorism is from another country.
No, terrorism can. How about Timothy McVeigh when he blew up the Oklahoma building? Right?
Yes, that was an act of terrorism. He intended
that was
to kill
domestic terrorism.
Domestic terrorism.
Okay, I'll correct my language. Can I say domestic terrorism?
I think it's only terrorism because it's Elon Musk and that's his buddy.
Okay, but
if it was anybody else, it wouldn't be terrorism.
Let's play the what if game. What if they created a new agency basically. They created an
agency. They did not vote into power. The people did not vote into power. Congress did not vote into power. How about Congress?
Let me back up for a second. Who are the people? Congress and Senate, right?
Yes, they didn't vote him in.
Yeah, which a lot of them have been benefiting. And I just pointed out to you that a lot of them get into power and they're worth X amount, and all of a sudden they're worth millions of dollars within a couple of years. Or they're worth
Corruption, no matter who it is,
Yeah,
needs to be rooted out.
that
That's
would-
a given.
Let me ask you a question. If a police officer, and I have immense expect, give an analogy, folks, but for law enforcement, if a police officer joined the force and he had like an average bare house, right, just average house, and all of a sudden the guy's living in a massive mansion 10 years down the road, and he's got money tucked away, in offshore accounts. Wouldn't that raise some eyebrows?
I would think so.
He's not elected. He's a hired civil servant.
If something stinks,
but there's
look
auditors.
at it. There's no problem with
There's
that.
auditors at the IRS. They're not elected, but a lot of what you're missing is a lot of the people who will be voting to audit themselves are the people who are corrupt. Why would they want to vote something like that in?
Oh, you mean like the stacked deck of every person he's putting in any one of these agencies? Trump is putting all of these people that don't have those skills, put them in those positions, and they all have to agree with him.
But let's just stick to one thing, right?
You don't think that's a little bit odd? That's not bipartisan. There's not a representation of all people there.
I'm not talking about bipartisan. I'm talking about if you had massive corruption. Let's look at the problem.
I think we can agree that if there's corruption, it doesn't matter what side corruption comes from.
Yeah.
Corruption needs to be rooted out.
And we're at a point now, America has become, in my opinion, a lot of it's become a joke. And I love this country. And
it's seriously become a joke in the last, since January.
How can you spend in California $30 billion, $30 billion, might I add, $30 billion, B with a billion, and you haven't built 1 foot of light rail? Nothing. In China, they throw up like COVID quarantine centers. They have like that. They tossed them right up. Skyscrapers. I think. Toby, what was the record for the skyscrapers? And something like that. They did one. It was like a month and a half or something like that, and they had like a 30 or 24-story building.
And I bet you they don't have OSHA or anybody there breathing down their neck to make sure it's put up correctly.
Yeah, but they have their own. Yeah, but don't knock the Chinese. The Chinese make quality stuff because they're a very industrious people. What they're doing is they're just good at what they do. But when 19 days?
57 stories.
57 stories in 19 days? Yeah. Man, I can't even when I was a kid, I couldn't put my Legos together that quick.
It used to take 6 to 7 years to build that. That's crazy.
Yeah, okay.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is we're being outdone or we're being defeated as a country. We're not really shooting any weapons. We're buying their junk. And what I'm getting at is, if you came into the presidency and you saw a country that was declining, how would you fix it? I mean, it's being defeated economically, which is causing stress on family units, which is causing things like divorces, addictions, dysfunctional children that grow up.
Well, some of those things happen on their own, regardless of whether or not that's
But you have
on.
to admit, since the late 70s and the 80s, has the amount of people standing with signs and spanging and drug addiction and divorces skyrocketed.
Yes, but that's not all just attributed
you agree
to the
with that. You
presidents
say yes.
before Trump.
No, I'm not.
That's not unique to
I'm
just
talking
them.
about a pattern of events that happened that caused us a course correction for this country. Now, the thing is, you came into the presidency. You're in the government, right? My thing is, you get elected. If your salary at congressman is probably $150,000, $200,000, or whatever they're making, tell me, maybe you could pop that up and take a look at the average salary, right? Now, that's what you make. You're being in the government on that level is, to me, it's
a job of service.
It's a job of service, and it's a calling to a higher need. the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. Spock. Words I live by. Okay.
Star Trek.
Okay. Star Trek. Right. And some of the greatest lessons I ever learned in life were the Bible and Star Trek. If you are a congressman and you get in there and you want to change the world, and next thing you know, you're taking bribes, and next thing you just don't go from making $150,000 or $200,000 a year. What's the average salary for a congressman?
Oh, for congressman.
Yeah, representative, senator. Let's just pop one up, because I mean, there's a
Then obviously something
famous
is going
Speaker of the
on.
House is a female. She's worth a lot of money.
But you're also assuming that these people also do not have investments.
Yeah,
or they're not
investments,
smart people
which
as
you
well.
just pointed out, right? Which you're saying that somebody, would.
Well, I'm just saying I don't know the parameters.
Yeah,
I
there's
don't
a
know
lot
what
of
they do or don't
there's
have.
a lot of greasing the wheels between these people. And but the thing is, they're there.
There's a lot of greasing the wheels going on right now.
I'm not disputing that, but the thing is, how do you fix it? How do
I
you?
think not the radical approach that he's taking.
Well,
where
you
it's
can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs.
yes, but you can make an omelet without stepping on people's First Amendment rights and without doing the things he's
Whose
doing.
First Amendment rights are being violated right now? I'm just
The
curious.
American people. Trump does not allow people who speak against him to speak at all. Censorship of the press. The press pool at the White House is now censored.
You want to hear
to
something?
only
You
ones
want to
he
hear something
allows
that's going
to
to
be
shake you to
there.
the core of your soul? He had dinner with Bill Maher. Bill Maher didn't pull any punches with him.
Bill Maher is well known, yes, and Bill Maher speaks out about a lot of things. But what about freedom of the press and freedom for the First Amendment to freedom of speech? He's all for freedom of speech as long as it is in alignment with his goals, his agenda, and speaking kindly about him. You cannot speak differently. And no other president has said,
let me point something out to you.
Prevented the press from being part of the press pool based off a popularity contest.
How warped our society has become, right? And this deals with anti-Semitism, which I deplore, okay? That's really bad. Let's talk about certain university. People protesting for Palestine, for Gaza, right? Jewish students being harassed, right? That kind of thing. Okay, let's flip it around. Let's say these are a bunch of white supremacist kids, and there's a bunch of African American.
I don't agree with harassment of anybody.
Now, hold on, I'm making a point. And there's a bunch of white supremacists, college people or whatever, or imported protesters. They came there, which some of this was, quite a few of it was. And there's these imported people, and these Afro-American college students are having to go to their classes and see this garbage in front of their face. Now,
freedom of speech.
No.
Freedom, and if you're protesting legally, then protest.
These are schools. There's a thing I'm going to point out to you. If that happened, the college would not have tolerated that for 1 minute. And yeah, those white supremacists do have their First Amendment rights to spout their mouths off. Okay. So, but at the same point in time, the college has a policy about bullying and toxic environment kind of thing, right? This can make students feel uncomfortable. That falls in that parameter. But it's okay to have these massive protests that are being funded by Democrat elites. They're funding it.
And you have what to back that up?
The money's coming from somewhere.
And you've just made your own pathway based off what you want it to be?
No, I'm not.
If the proof is in the pudding, if you've got proof, then show it. If you don't have proof, don't extrapolate what you think is going on based off
let's talk about that one item. Just one item, right? And we're going to get back to what we're talking about here in 2 minutes. So you're a Jewish student, right? And your grandfather, who loved you very much, grandmother, was a survivor of the Holocaust and told you what horrific things happened.
Well, it was horrific.
Yes, hold on. And now your whole life, people, will react sometimes differently when you tell them you're Jewish or, Hebrew, that kind of thing. And I know what it feels like because I'm not Hebrew, I'm not Jewish. But they have to walk past this walk past this garbage. But the thing is, First Amendment rights, in my opinion, apply to common areas like that are not. That's private property. That's a school. Okay, but this is how we.
I don't know what the laws for the school are.
This is how we treat things in cancel culture, or we view it the way we want to view it. We tilt the pinball machine so the ball will go a certain direction. Okay, those protests should not have been allowed on those campuses at all. They should have been allowed. Period. Right? They're not protesting for for a cleaner environment.
Well, I don't think protests in general have a guideline as to what the content you're allowed to protest is. It's just about peaceful protest. Now, if they're harassing
they're
someone,
breaking stuff, they're harassing people.
Then that's a different story.
And there's also
there's guidelines to protesting the way you're supposed to protest.
In high school right now, if you went to a high school and you walked up to some African-American kid, besides getting your face punched in, right, and you called them some kind of racial slur, that is not good. And the school will kick you right out, right?
Of course.
But if you send it to a Jewish student, it's your First Amendment rights.
There's a fine line in there. I don't know what the law is for what you are or not allowed to do for protesting at a college. I think
what you need to look at is going back to Reagan. For his first term, I thought, like, this guy's going to get us into a nuclear war. And I could see his strategy, and I was like, wow, this is actually really smart. And then he was one of the great presidents, in my opinion. He was
a good Republican president.
He was a great Republican president. Okay, but the thing is, you put yourself in Trump's shoes coming in, and the economy's all messed up, right? And we have fentanyl pouring across the border, right? And I can tell you, originally it was a Chinese gig. They were the ones making it, and now they sent it to South America. And what they're doing, we're just ruining the people of South America with drugs. And there's a lot of, like, their government people down there. They want to change things, but they can't. They're overwhelmed. I mean, if you speak out about it, you can lose your life. The thing is, a lot of organized crime in this country went legit. They just went into legitimate businesses. They just morphed into something else. But that's not what you got going on down there. The thing is, it's destabilizing this country. Fentanyl has killed countless Americans. One I knew. Okay, I mean,
fentanyl is a dangerous drug. There's no doubt about it.
It's poison. It's horrific. It's doing nothing. We saw somebody in the throes of fentanyl addiction, and look what happened to her.
Nothing good.
Turned her into a different person.
Yes.
And right before, just and what was the end game? What she lost everything. Okay, I knew a woman who has a daughter. She lost her daughter.
Fentanyl is a drug that should be eradicated, but it's a scourge. But
how do you eradicate it? The thing is, during the Biden administration, okay, well, just hear me on this, right? The southern border, right? There's a couple 100,000 people coming across. There's a 13, or I heard last count, somebody told me it was between 15 and 20 million now, or something like that. There are so many illegal immigrants that have come in here, right? And they're on public assistance, and a lot of them work, a lot of them pay taxes. But at the same point in time, you talked about due process, right? Okay, this is how we're being defeated as a nation. We've got all these dragons, right? We've got, manufacturing that left the country. We've got destabilizing the American family, right? And this theory, or whatever you want to call it, I'm talking about, applies to any country, right? You have to have the children are the future of tomorrow, period, right?
We're cutting the funding for all of the agencies that provide funding for people of color, people of poverty, and eliminating these agencies is not going to be the answer to fixing the problem.
I'll look into that, but I think a lot of the funding that was cut was to
is cut by people who don't do those jobs, who
mm,
don't know the structure of
I'm
a
gonna
lot of those jobs.
I'm gonna tap you.
and
I'm gonna tap your
can't-
information, right? On one aspect. Before Trump came into office, during the Biden administration, what was the amount the Inspector General said of fraud, straight fraud, that they couldn't control was the dollar amount?
I don't know.
And I think it was 236, 238. They couldn't get to it. We're $77 trillion in debt, or it's an astronomical sum. Just to let you know, by that number, every 4.5 years, there's another $1 trillion of debt because the country's getting ripped off. Do you see where the brakes need to get put on this? We need to stop this. The founding fathers who fought for this country, who sat down and made the Constitution, would want us to
Follow it,
thank you, follow the Constitution, but hold on. But at the
which
same
he's
way,
not doing.
right? Yeah, but there's a reason why he's not doing it. I'm going to point that out.
It doesn't matter. The founding
No.
fathers set that in
No.
place so that we would
I'm
have
going to
those
go back
building
to.
blocks.
I'm going to go back to.
So what you're saying is the law applies to every president that has served other than the current
what I'm going to
president.
get to is one simple fact. During the Biden administration,
That
and
makes him a dictator.
during the Biden administration and during the Obama administration, the border people just poured across because the Democrats wanted to up their game for voters so they could stay in power. That's really what that was about. Anybody can see it as plain as day. Now, I'm a former.
And you can't see
Hold on,
plain
I'm
as
not-
day that requiring every single person prove their citizenship.
Ma'am, I'm not.
and have their
all due
rights-
respect, I'm not done yet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't think
Yeah.
that's stacking the deck? They're stacking that deck against
No,
the
but
old
what I'm
people
getting
and
at
the people of color and people of
is
poverty
you
not being
have
able to afford
50
to.
15 to 20 million, or last count when I officially heard was 13 million illegal immigrants in here, right? If you go by due process, now listen to the way this rolls. The border, people are pouring across the border because they're getting a free meal ticket. They come
Some are
across,
coming in for asylum. Some are coming in
I
under different
agree,
circumstances.
and a lot of them are really
Persecution from
really
countries they're
good
coming
people,
from.
right? Also, there's
And only a small percentage of those are criminals, probably.
yeah, but how much a network do you need to distribute fentanyl and drugs around the United States? You need.
That's like making an entire population, saying an entire population is dirty because of 3 or 4 bad apples that make it across.
The other analogy is a bunch of
The vast
sheep,
majority
a
are
bunch
not.
of sheep came across the border, and there was some wolves cloaked with them that came across, because we can agree that not all of them, there was 1.3 million of them were slated to be deported by judges,
Well, then
and that's
they're-
a list of. And
if
that's
they've
a
gone
list
through
of,
the process and that's where they're
yeah,
supposed
but
to be, then
but
there's
the
no
thing is,
problem
there's
with that.
so many of them. During Obama, Biden, when they were deporting them, you have more of them. Say you deport like 1,000, and then 2,000 come across. You see what I'm saying? It's like it's like some kind of big joke. I mean, you're trying to get rid of sand on the table, and somebody keeps pouring more on it, and you're never going to get rid of
Well,
it.
you can't fix things
Mhm.
by
Let's
also
give it-
trying to, at the same
but
time,
I-
to take rights that
but I'm-
already exist away,
But I'm.
like birthright citizenship.
Would you say our country's bankrupt?
I'd say it's in trouble.
Okay, we both.
But
agree.
I don't
Hold on a second.
believe the process
said
that he is going about is what's going to fix
Then
it.
how would you fix it? I'm curious. Give me your
Not by
spin on it.
breaking laws,
Okay, but
not by
I asked
denying people, due process. You
Mhm.
want to just grab people off the street?
Mhm.
I have no problem with grabbing the people that are actually criminals. I don't think anybody has a problem with
That's the
criminals
ones that are
leaving.
deporting.
But even when they make mistakes, they don't
What
rectify
mistakes?
them.
What mistakes? You're talking about
The gentleman that I think they said was that he had been pre-approved already 3 years before that, 3 years in a row, by Trump's previous presidency. He was approved every year that he had checked in. And then now they catch up to him and they're like, no, you're an MS-30. They sent him to El Salvador. They said deport him to anywhere.
Why do you
but
think El Salvador is not giving him up?
And they're not giving him up.
Because he's a criminal.
That's going to have to be
And-
all
and
be
his-
argued
and
out
his
in court
country of
because there's
origin-
everybody arguing complete
Okay,
opposite
so what are
sides
the
of that
immigration?
equation.
So let me back you up for a second. What are the immigration laws in the United States? if you committed a crime in your home country, right?
You would be deported to your home country.
No. You commit a crime in your home country. You try and immigrate to another country. The other country asks for your criminal records, your medical records, whatever they do, right?
Okay.
And they see you've committed violent offenses and robberies and things like that. Nope, you're not coming in here.
I would assume so. If you were an adult.
Oh, okay.
For all
So if he followed due process, then he would have never made it to the United States.
But did they do that then?
How could they?
Approved 3 years
He
in a row
hikes
when he was
across
under
the-
the Trump
He
presidency.
got himself across the border. There's been
and paid his taxes and checked in every year and did exactly what he was
I'll
required
look into
to
that
do.
after the interview's done and delve into it a
But
little more.
you know, whatever
But the thing
law
is,
applies to it, whatever the law says is what should be followed.
The other thing too is he said that if he gets deported back to El Salvador, rival gangs will kill him. He said that. So that makes
There's a lot of persecution in other countries that doesn't occur necessarily
not
here.
from the government. They're talking. He said rival gangs will kill him.
I don't know. I'm not
That's his
familiar with
words.
that piece of it. But all
Yeah.
I remember was that it was seeing something that said that if he was deported, not to deport him back to El Salvador, that he feared for his life. Now, I don't know the
Great, send him to
specifics
Guantanamo
around.
Bay, and they can house him there. What I'm getting at is there's so many problems destabilizing the country. You said the country's in trouble.
I feel that what he's doing is
by-
destabilizing it further.
By allowing all this illegal immigration to come in here, have we put a strain on our system, right? Our welfare system, right? And our Medicaid system and free medical for all these guys. Have we put a strain there we can't even take care of our own people? Yes. Do you know when they come across the border, they get $2,000 cash?
I'm not familiar with if that is
Yeah.
accurate or not.
Yeah, they get a card. They get money right away. Get clothing, all kinds of help. What about all the people that are sleeping on the streets around here that are addicted? Maybe they might need some rehab. What we need to do is clean up one dragon at a time. I established, and I think that you can agree with me, between the late 70s and the 80s, America started changing.
Yes.
Manufacturing jobs went away. Both people had to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or one would work long hours, okay, and make sure everybody was taken care of, okay. So we agreed on that, and it hasn't gotten better from decade to decade moving forward. Now we're in our upper years now, okay, and I'd say America's not good. The American economy is definitely not going in the right direction. So when do we put the brakes on? When do we say, okay, we need to put a stop to
Putting
this?
the brakes on it within rhyme and reason makes sense. But this, overhanded approach is not effective the way he's doing things.
I'm going to go back to Reagan, his first term, when he started playing his chess game with the Soviets.
This isn't a chess game. You're playing with people's lives.
So was Reagan, and he won.
I don't think this is going to turn out that way. You didn't have people in the streets protesting what he's doing.
Oh, yes, you did during Reagan. Oh, God, yeah, there was protests. One guy tried to kill Reagan. Almost succeeded, and it was horrific. One of the aides ended up
getting shot. One of the FBI agents, I do believe.
Yeah, it was. That's not the case. There was a lot of turmoil. And Ronald Reagan went in there, and he made an omelet. He broke a few eggs.
You expect any president when they come in, Democrat or Republican, they are going to make X amount of waves.
Yeah.
Because that's just the way it works.
Mm-hmm.
They're always going to make waves that the other side doesn't necessarily agree with.
These problems.
But there's huge waves from both sides. His constituents, these town hall meetings they're having.
Oh, they're nasty.
The Republicans, the senators, and that don't want to even show up to him because their constituents are so angry with what he is doing.
Yes, in the short run, they're going to be.
In the short run, I don't think it's going to calm down. I think it's going to escalate. I think it's going to get worse.
I think that
and I
the
think
Democrats
you're potentially headed toward a civil war.
What I'd like to say, one of the things I want to do with this show, this podcast, is about unity, right?
I don't think there's unity with Trump. There's only division.
Well,
there's no unity, only division. What other president have you had ever that you can remember referring to any kind of a bipartisan thing? All other presidents have reached out to both sides to try to mend fences, to try to forge friendships, to try to forge bonds. Every word out of the man's mouth sows division. The radical right, the radical left, the radical. Happy Easter to everybody, including all these people that do this, and this. And it's just this derogatory list of nastiness. That is not presidential.
Well,
that is not a rational person.
let's just say he
making
has his
statements
own
like that.
style, which tends to rub people the
That's
wrong way.
Not okay.
But getting back to what we're
You're a
talking about,
president. You are supposed to
the
represent
tariffs,
all people.
the immigration coming in, the country, in my
Then
opinion,
do it the way you're supposed
yeah,
to
but
do it.
Social Security, right? They predicted Social Security by the time we would need
He's
it.
already messing with that.
No, it's already bankrupt. They've dipped on it so many different times. So many different administrations have dipped on it, right? And they keep playing with the numbers and what have you. There's not. I don't think there's dog food or cat food left there for people. It's and everybody like, oh, you should mess with it. Well, you know what's funny is the only agency the government runs is the United States Postal Service that makes a profit. And you know what
And
Congress,
typically,
they
Postal Service
ransack it.
does not make a profit.
Yes, it does, because the reason it doesn't make a profit is because Congress dips on it all the time. And then, but we've got so many dragons, congressmen and people getting elected that magically are worth millions of dollars in a short period of time. But nobody can. All they do is speaking engagement. They just made $150,000 by talking about their new book. Yeah, you know that's backdoor money. Come on now. Okay.
If it lines up and it investigates out,
Well, then
then
yeah.
it's if it walks like a duck, talks like it's a duck.
Going
I
back
don't
to
have
the
any problem with
going
that.
back to the founding fathers, the age of American Enlightenment. Okay. Wow, what a great name for a podcast.
They would be turning over in their grave with what he is doing
The
currently.
original progressive people would
Set three different parts of government to keep any one piece from having a say over the other. And then you have President Trump who comes in and goes, oh, none of that applies to me.
No,
Executive order. I make the laws.
Before that
all
happened,
laws and all agencies answer
a lot of
to
men
me.
and women in that time period risked their lives to break the oppression from the crown, from the British. Risked their lives. A lot of them died.
And what he is doing right now goes against the grain of all of that.
Yeah, but how do you get rid of all this corruption? How do you level it out?
You don't do it by becoming the end-all, be-all for everything. All avenues answer to me. That reeks of dictatorship or authoritarian government. And that is not what the American people
speaking of authoritarian government,
voted for.
Who, during the Biden administration, who was running the country?
The president.
Oh,
the
really?
President's advisors.
Or the president's auto pen?
Really? Are you grasping at straws that badly?
No. Biden did not have his faculties about him.
And you think Mr. Sharpie has all his faculties with him?
That's not what I'm getting at.
He thinks that he doesn't even know how his own government is actually supposed to work. The man just make it happen.
Getting back to Biden, right?
I signed it, so therefore it's a law. Everybody answers to me.
You know that they spent $13 billion on on EV charging stations. This is correct. $13 billion. And they built a handful of them for $13 billion.
I can't speak to something I have no knowledge of.
There's a problem. Money goes to Ukraine, right? We're trying to, help out a nation.
He's not trying to help out Ukraine anymore.
No,
he's cozied up to Putin, and he is Putin's puppet.
Now, I'm not talking about Putin's puppet. I'm not talking about Putin. Oh, by the way, the richest man on the planet, actually, you just mentioned his name. He keeps it a secret. But that's actually the richest man on the planet. But let's get back to where I was going with this, right? Is that you have all this corruption, all this snaggle of knots, and just everything's all intertwined, right? How do you unravel this? The thing is, I have heard no good answers from the other side of the aisle, right? At the same point in time,
no good answers from that side of the aisle.
Don't you find it a problem that both of the Democrats and Republicans don't talk to each other. And they can't
Well, they
find common
can't
ground
really
to
talk
fix.
to each other right now if every single appointee
Mhm.
is a person that's willing to kiss Trump's butt.
Okay.
You need pushback. If you are a person in that kind of a position, you need pushback. You need people who are willing to say no to you when they need to say no.
Mhm.
You need to have people who are willing to enforce what you need enforced when it needs to be enforced. A president should not have anybody that is unwilling to put and set their course straight when they are off course. You need to have somebody who tells you, you are way too far
Okay.
here, you're too far
Let's
over
talk
there.
about President.
And you need to have both sides represented. That means people that you like, people maybe that you don't like. You need to have all parties represented if you really want to be speaking for the American people. Because the American people are not left, they're not right, they're both.
Mhm.
It's a commonality of everyone. And no, you're not going to be able to please everybody all of the time, but you do need to represent both sets of people
Mhm.
equally
But
to do your job well.
thank you for watching American Enlightenment. We're going to continue this conversation in part 2 with Sherry in an interview.